What do toilets and war have in common? Russian army became famous for stealing toilets when they invaded Georgia in 2008. That weird gadget impressed savages so much that they started to pull it out to take home. Seems like nothing was changed until now, and videos showing Russian soldiers looting in Ukraine began making the rounds on social media. Lavatory habits can be regarded as a window into a society. When it came to the looting of toilets by Russian soldiers in the raging Ukraine conflict, speculation about why it happens was piqued. It even prompted Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky to remark that the biggest Russian dream before dying had changed. Instead of seeing Paris, it was now stealing a toilet. Some may have a crazy question, but what is the actual situation with toilets in Russia and Ukraine? Of course, not all 100% of residents have central sewerage. The level of sewerage's housing in Russia is 78% and in Ukraine 60%. Also, we cannot forget that both in Russia and in Ukraine, autonomous sewage systems, septic tanks, are now ubiquitous. In Ukraine, the toilet, a la cesspool, is used by 40% of residents, and in Russia it's used by 16%. Russians are ironic about the fact that according to Ukrainian propaganda, there are no toilets in Russia. Representatives of the Russian Foreign Ministry have repeatedly accused the Ukrainian side of filming staged videos of looting by Russian soldiers. However, we do not forget that the myth of Russians who have not seen toilets was invented for a reason, but as a visual illustration of the low standard of living in Russia. This is the reason why military marauding has a long tradition in the Russian army, going back to the establishment of the Soviet Army, which was built on the principle that stealing from your enemy is the norm. These traditions have been repeatedly manifested during different Soviet and Russian wars. In December 1918, the Bolshevik troops invaded the Ukrainian People's Republic territory. The commander of the Kiev offensive, Mikhail Muravyov, inspired the soldiers with calls to deal with the enemies of the revolution and promised to hand Kiev over to his subordinates for looting. When the Reds entered Kiev, they brought the promises to life. The Bolsheviks staged a massacre in the city and began to loot it. During World War II, looting, alongside rape, was one of the most common war crimes committed by the Red Army. When Soviet soldiers entered Europe, they were amazed at the level of prosperity they saw. European elegance contrasted with gray Soviet everyday life and the low standard of living in the USSR. However, it is needed to point out that many Red Army soldiers came from the territories devastated by the war. Many did not have their own homes anymore. They lived one day at a time, burning with revenge, led by feelings of impunity and permissiveness. Also, they were frequently of poor education and culture. Additionally, the command partly encouraged looting and tried to support the soldiers' morale with such rewards. Soviet soldiers and officers were allowed to send parcels with trophies home. Generals and marshals sent entire echelons of stolen property to the USSR. It is known that Marshal Georgy Zhukov, one of the symbols of the Soviet victory, filled 7 carriages with the most expensive German furniture. If comes to soldiers, wristwatches were one of the most coveted trophies for a Soviet soldier. The Red Army men were not knowledgeable about watches, so they often wore women's ones. In many war photos, you can see Red Army soldiers with a watch on both of their hands. The Soviet leadership even tried to legalize looting. For this purpose, the trophy brigades were established. Their task was to collect war reparations, mainly from Germany. According to the official data, 21,834 wagons of assets and 73,493 wagons of building materials and apartment goods and valuables were removed from the Soviet zone of occupied Germany. These included 174,151 kilos of gold, silver, and platinum, 60,000 grand pianos, 190,000 carpets, 460,000 radios, 265,000 grandfather clocks, 940,000 pieces of furniture, 1.2 million coats, 1 million hats, and 20 million liters of alcohol. Russians also exported raw materials, machine tools, and industrial equipment from captured German factories. 100 tons of uranium exported from Germany accelerated the creation of the first industrial reactor in the USSR. The modern Russian army is a direct descendant of the Soviet military. Its behavior testifies not only to traditions, but also to Russian poverty and thug aesthetics. It seems that some Russian soldiers steal everything that they can, including toilets. In the 1990s, this was apparent in Chechnya. The Chechen wars were assumed to be an internal conflict. This enabled Russians to hide the biggest war crimes from the world. According to the Human Rights Watch report from February 1, 1995, Russian troops in Chechnya systematically loot and engage in disorderly conduct, ranging from the wholesale looting of a single village to petty thievery against displaced persons at military checkpoints. In 2008, Russians resorted to looting in Georgia. Former Georgian parliament member Give Targamez recalled, "They behave like medieval hordes. They take away computer equipment. That's okay. But household items, stools, do not know where they live. Probably Russians have neither military bases nor normal houses. It looks like they are not paid money but are offered to live off the loot during such raids." Also, the Russo-Ukrainian War has seen looting and theft on some scale. In April 2022, a few days after leaving Bucha, Irpin, Borodenka, and other towns of the Kiev region, Russians occupied the department of the Belarusian delivery service for several hours to send home hundreds of parcels with looted property. Seems like stealing is embedded in Russian army DNA. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share. Also, visit our second channel with military power comparisons. See you next time.